Thank you, everyone, for taking off your Tuesday afternoon to come to this event. It is a very tough time, given that it's after lunch. So hope you had your coffee, and I will try my best to keep you interested in what I'm going to present. All right. So we've been talking a lot about technology. We've been talking a lot about AI. We've been talking a lot about machine learning. I'm sure the term CDP is not alien to the market as well. I'm sure there's been a lot of conversations about organizations adopting CDPs, which is typically customer data platform. Customer data platform very simply does four things really well. One, it has the ability to collect data from any data point, any data source. From there, it typically has the ability to collect those information, form it into a profile, and add attributes to that profile. So basically understanding customer behavior. And then the third portion is to make sure that profile exists in every single solution, whether it's an email platform, whether it's your analytics, whether it's your customer care solution, whether it's your customer experience solution. But the reference of the data still comes from the CDP. And then the fourth portion where it does really well is it respects customer consent as we collect that information. So that's typically what a CDP does from a very basic point of view, from a very core point of view. Now, there's been a lot of conversations when you bring up CDP because what is the actualization of the ROI behind it? How do you approach CDP and then look at what you get in return, given that it connects into various different technologies, various different endpoints like your email platforms and so on. So that's the topic that I actually want to cover. Along with that, we will obviously touch in terms of the theme today. We talk about how AI is then affecting this trend. But the goal today is to give you a sort of a framework that you can typically take home and try and apply it to your business as you try to look for technology, a CDP technology. Now, just in terms of the topics covered today, I won't go in detail, but the goal is to kind of give you an idea from here on forth in terms of how do you kind of quantify the ROI for CDP. Now, Mr. Min just spoke about there is a hurdle in terms of getting budgets from CEOs, right? So how do you go back to your management? How do you tell your management that this is the estimated outcome that we are going to get if you implement the CDP, number one, or you go down the line after 3 years, you look back and basically quantify what has been the returns. So this is just a very quick framework that I keep giving to you. Obviously, if you want to delve deeper, I'm always available out there. And then obviously speak to my partner, AKA, who will typically can guide you through this process as well. So the first thing is, before you get a CDP, is pretty much pertinent that you have a very clear objectives in terms of what you're trying to achieve with the CDP. CDP is not a magical platform, but it gives you the power to have great data or clean data across your organization and break silos within the organization. And that's how typically you can move on to the next step of machine learning and typically AI. But in terms of understanding how do you start this project, the first thing is to have a simple thing, basically understanding what are you trying to achieve? What is your great vision, right? So what are the objectives that you're trying to solve? What problem are you trying to solve from a data perspective within your organization? So that's the first part, your vision. Then typically, how are you going to address it? What team are you going to put in place? What technologies are you going to get involved in the mix? What kind of data points, what kind of customer touch points are you going to get involved in that whole project? And then comes the technology that typically you want to go out and procure, right? So two important points is understanding the why, and then understanding the how, and then you can go down to taking on a technology that fits your business. And that is pretty much what we do with all our customers, right? But the goal there is then once you get that idea or framework on board, you typically want to move up the maturity curve so that you see returns as you kind of continue with the project. And that is the goal of typically understanding the ROI framework. So why are companies investing in CDPs? Apologies, I had to remove some of the logos because we don't necessarily have permission to share all of them. But these are the type of ROIs, or rather outcomes, that we have been working with some of the customers, right? So some of them have seen in personalization, they have seen 7x returns in terms of ROI in their CDPs. Or they have seen 25% more engagement out of their personalization activities just by using CDP in the mix. Or they have seen 20% increase in marketing efficiency from getting in insights and then actioning on the insights almost immediately. And then we also have, we have seen customers retain 5% of their customer retention. Now this is a small number, but for this specific customer, they've only been using the CDP for a year. And then we've also seen customers typically outdo competitors, their own competitors, by 20% in terms of revenue by using predictive analytics. The ability to understand what can typically happen when you kind of create certain actions within the CDP. So the first step is setting clear objectives. So these are some of the objectives that you can typically set within your CDP project. Things like enhancing customer personalization. Customer personalization is a very data-rich requirement. So you need to make sure that you're capturing data not only from online sources, but if you are a business that exists online and offline, you typically need to make sure those offline data also come in so that you can personalize effectively. Streamline marketing and governance operations. So there was a conversation around customer data governance. How do you make sure that your customer has given you consent, whether you can act on it? Are you making sure that all your customers have consent? Are you calling them, or are you typically sending out emails to them? So you typically have to have an ability to make sure that you're capturing those consent as the customer data comes in, right? And then basically, at the end of the day, we look at driving revenue growth, right? So that is one of the key objectives that we work with some of our customers when they set out on a CDP project. Now, here are some of the KPIs. So KPIs are typically, they're not necessarily to keep you in check, but they are sort of a compass to allow you to understand exactly where your project is heading from a CDP perspective. So if you look at this, these are some of the KPIs that we work with our customers to kind of enable them on the CDP. So for example, customer lifetime value. That is a very, very big KPI. But over time, you need to make sure that every single customer that is engaging with your brand is benefiting, well, it's benefiting both sides. It's benefiting the customer from an engagement perspective, but you also want to make sure that it also benefits your business, right? And then conversion rate, which is, again, a very simple KPI metric for you to track. You need to make sure that over time, that when you have clean data coming through across the organization, your conversion rate over time is also going up, which means you are effectively engaging the customer and you're basically giving the customer what they want so that they feel comfortable to transact with your organization. And then obviously overall marketing ROI, right? The goal is to help marketers at the end of the day. So we want to make sure the marketing efficiency matrix is there. So all the ad dollars that you're pumping out, you want to make sure it comes back threefold, fivefold. So what are the leveraging, what basically can you do once you start leveraging KPIs for strategic initiatives, right? So the first thing is you align all your KPIs with your overall business objectives. So as I mentioned earlier, before you get on to a CDP project, make sure you have a very defined set of objectives. And what you want to do is when you create those KPIs like this, make sure it aligns to the overall business objective. Now, the other thing that you can use your KPIs for is to make sure that you identify area of success. So, for example, are there areas of improvements? Are there areas that are typically opportunities for you to fix? So within a customer experience journey, there might be a place where customers are not happy when they do an onboarding with you. So those are the areas that you would typically want to address and make sure you kind of tweak it so that it basically moves up. And then obviously regularly review your KPIs. Are they still relevant to your business today? Are they, is it in line with your CEO strategic objectives for 2025, right? So typically, you have the ability to use this KPI metrics, not as a punishment point, but more from a guiding process to make sure that you're constantly benefiting the business. Now, let's go deep dive a little bit into the quantitative and qualitative measures. So quantitative, as you know, it basically relates to money in dollars, right? Dollars and cents. And then qualitative are typically your customer experience matrix, right? Your NPS, which also relates to dollars, but at the end of the day, it's not tangible over-counter kind of approach, but it's still as important as quantitative. So the first one, So the first one is quantitative metrics, right? So these are typically your dollars and cents, where you track things like revenue growth, cost reduction, and enhanced customer engagement. So this is where you typically look at how many percent increase in customer engagement over time with the CDP. Is it 5%? Is it 20%? Is it 60%? Basically hard numbers. And then revenue growth, pretty much straightforward. Are you seeing dollar increase within the organization when a customer transacts with you? And then things like cost reduction. Are you seeing an effective spend on your ads that you're sending out? Thank you. Hello? Yeah, that's better. So what I've done here is just giving you a very simple formula. There are more complex formulas than this, but this is a very, very quick, simple formula in terms of calculating your return on investment of your CDP. Now, this is just some example that I've prepared for you. So this is a very simple company that we did out in Malaysia in 2021, where they made about, in a year, they make about $1 billion. They spend about $4 million on advertising, and that's where the CDP cost comes in. Again, this is an example. It's a large organization, very data-rich organization. So what we did was we looked at certain areas. Again, this is based on their business objectives in terms of what they were looking to improve, right? So they were looking at marketing efficiencies. That means in terms of removing manual work from the data cleansing. They talked about operational efficiencies, how they basically transact with the customer. And then they looked about analytics efficiencies in terms of how quick they get data for insights. And then basically align with their organizational goals, which is they had this unified marketing dream. They had this approach to retain customers and then as well as overall CX improvements. So what they saw there was the ability to combine all of these, and they realized that with what the CDP was going to cost them, they realized it was a 15x. Again, this is an estimated value, but it is something that we use to convince the CFO to renew our license, right? Now the next part is qualitative, right? So qualitative are intangible, basically your customer experience, right? Overall customer experience. Not necessarily translate to monies and dollars, but it helps you in the long term because typically this is where you track your net promoter score, which is where customers recommend other customers your brand, right? So it helps you to define long-term strategies. So these are some of the KPIs or some areas that you can talk about when you talk about qualitative measurements, right? Improve customer satisfaction over time. Better data governance. Now, better data governance, again, you can't quantify it. It's not dollars and cents, but there is a statistic that says if the customer trusts your brand, 80% of the time, they will convert, right? So basically having the ability to respect customers' privacy. And then increase operational efficiency. So this is basically removing manual work from the whole equation. And then innovation and market adaptability. Are you taking out the right products? Are your products doing the right thing in terms of engaging with customers? Are you putting in strategies to engage the right type of the customers, right? So what happens here is, we looked at a qualitative factor, and this is where we basically came out with a model to calculate the benefits that they saw out of this, right? So over time, they saw the value of single view of customer, because that way they understood the customer well enough that the minute when the customer engages with them, they know that this customer is a happy customer or a customer that is not so happy, so maybe let's not sell them. Maybe seek to serve them before selling to them, right? Then they also understand of real-time value, real-time analytics into their organization, which allowed them to then understand how to engage with every single customer in the moment. And then the last part is standardized data. Now, standardized data is basically a very, very important point, because you're collecting data from various sources. And then the ability to have that single definition of data across your organization basically gave them a very good value in terms of how they transformed that operation. So overall, they saw a benefit of just about 2 million in terms of how it basically gave them their bottom line. So again, please, I'll spare you the numbers. I won't explain to you. But this is what, in terms of how do you come up with an ROI presentation to your CFO, typically you go through a practice like this, where you kind of put in your cost and then look at overall benefit that you have seen by implementing a CDP in space. So this is just an example. I'm happy to chat with you later on in terms of the details of it. All right, so let's dive into some of the techniques and tools that are out there. So the first one is using a scorecard. So the ability to have a scorecard can help you to capture the impact holistically. I'll share with you a format of scorecard, but it gives you the ability to kind of understand all the different areas that the CDP will impact within your organization. So typically you have the matrix. So the matrix that to include in your scorecard are your customer experience matrix, your marketing improvement matrix, as well as your sales and revenue impact, right? So typically you use things like customer segmentation to understand customers more accurately, and then the ability to measure effectiveness of your targeted messages or your personalization strategies on them. Then you use A/B testing, right? So A/B testing is basically seeing what is the better way to engage with the customer, and what is the fastest way to, at the end of the day, to convert the customer. And then sort of a longitudinal analysis, which basically not just covers the CDP, but it covers the full suite, whether it's your customer engagement platform, your email platform, your analytics, your paid media. So you kind of run an analysis across the whole breadth to really understand what is the impact that you've seen over time by implementing a CDP. So this is an example of a scorecard. Now, all you need to understand is this portion here. Typically, it gives you the categories of the areas that you want to track as a business objective. But at the same time, it gives you KPIs. What are you trying to track, right, from a KPI perspective? And this is the details. Again, this is something that I can share with you very quickly later if you come over to the slide. But the goal is to have a very calculated view of what you're trying to achieve when you put in a CDP. So this is an example that I got from the customer. The customer didn't want to share the revenue growth. But this is a very simple example that I got from the customer. Now, everything is in dollars and cents, except for data utilization. They had their own metrics in terms of how well the CDP affected those metrics. But it's a scale from 1 to 5 that they basically filled in. But the goal here is to make sure over time, so this is done over 6 months, but the goal is over time is to make sure the average improvement state, it basically overtakes the baseline before the CDP implemented the CDP. So this is actually a real example from one of the customer. Now, this is a very quick sample dashboard that we have within the CDP that gives you a view of your KPIs, and typically from a revenue perspective. That customer is not doing so well yet, but obviously we'll improve them. But the goal here is to have this within reach, right? So that you share this dashboard across the board, you communicate these KPIs effectively. Second one is a sample CX dashboard where you track your things like NPS and so on. Now, once you get your insights, once you understand where your KPIs are heading, what is the model that you're going to take to continue this iterative process of improving your CDP usage, right? So the ability that we look at is strategic agility, which means you are willing to change within the strategic goals, right? So obviously you have a set business goals, and you want your agility to move you want the agility to move within those business goals on how do you want to tweak certain areas. So this is a cyclical sort of a process that you go through when you are trying to implement changes. So the first thing is have your data collection, which is, in this case, your scorecard, not the CDP data collection, but this is your scorecard. Understand where the fall points are, understand where typically it's causing some issues, or understand what is repeatable. And then insight generation, obviously through analytics, the goal is to get insights. And then you implement the new strategy. You kind of come up with ideation, and then implement the strategy. You look at the impact, and then obviously you adjust the strategy again, right? And then within that, in the middle, you have continuous feedback loops, right? So basically the ability to track as you go, asking for feedback across your different stakeholders, whether it's employees, whether it's your customers, but to make sure that you're constantly getting that flow of feedback from every stakeholder that is involved in this project. Now, one of the things that you can do is to kind of foster a culture of data-driven decision-making. So this is a typical map that one of our customers shared, where they basically use the approach of making sure that they have a data-driven culture within the organization. Everything else, they leverage analytics and the AI to give them insights and suggestions on what to do. They encourage cross-departmental collaboration. So it's not only the marketing department that took charge of the CDP, you also had the data department getting involved in the project. You had the operations department getting in the project. You had in this case, it was an e-commerce customer, so you also had the logistics department getting involved in the project, where everyone shared and collaborated to provide improvement points. And then obviously encourage feedback loops. Every time you make a change, the goal is to get understanding whether the change is working or not. So this again is a model that one of our customers use, sort of basically kind of understanding how to implement the changes, right? So out of that process, they understand that these are the 3 points that they want to make a change, which channels they are going to make the changes to, and then these are the action items that they detail in with the timeline, obviously, and then who is in charge of each of these changes. And then again, as they implement the new change, it goes into a feedback loop cycle back to that earlier process, and as they make changes. So it's a sort of a cycle process that they go through to improve their strategies based on the insights they driven from the CDP. So a part of the conversation was, the future of ROI measurement for CDP. So a big part of it is machine learning. So machine learning basically gives you the ability to understand what data has been collected and how do you typically use the data to kind of come up with better insights. So a platform that can collect and make sure your data quality is ready for AI or ready for machine learning is where we are heading as a platform. So we're making sure as we collect the information or as we collect data, we are making sure the data is ready for the next step. In our case, is machine learning. And then once we have the understanding that the data that is within your environment is clean and good enough for AI, then we typically move into next session, which is giving you the ability to kind of understand what offers to give which customer. So the goal here is to give you the ability to suggest actions for a customer if certain strategies are not working. So it's more of a suggestive approach where we give you the ability to understand whether if this segment may not work for you, should you be trying offer A, offer B, or offer C. And that's how typically it goes back into the process, whether it's going to be changed again or whether you're going to basically go with that process moving forward until comes a time where your customer behavior change again and you kind of change that whole process. So typically, from our approach, what we are trying to do is we're trying to make sure before you kind of leverage the CDP portion, you understand exactly what data you're trying to collect, what are the strategies that you're trying to achieve from an organizational level, and from there typically understand your next steps from an action point of view. All right, we are done. If you want to connect, we are typically, you can scan the thing, you can connect with me on LinkedIn. I'll be more than happy to have that conversation with you in terms of how you design your ROI measurement for your future CDP projects. Thank you.